I've been invited to Info Dump. And I have the 10-minute video feature, which means not only can I info dump vampire folklore, but instead of spreading it across multiple videos, I can put a whole bunch in one video. Which means those of you who have been following me for a long time have heard a lot of this before. But, yeah. So, the sun does nothing to vampires except make them a little bit weaker. They're not going to instantly burn up and turn into ash. That's right. In folklore, vampires do go out in the sun and have no harm done to them. In fact, there's an account from, I believe, Russia of a true vampire in which he actually rose from the grave at dawn and returned to it at sunset. But he did that to help out his family's farm until he could be sure that his wife and kids could support themselves without him. And then he went on to his eternal rest. But yeah, sunlight does not harm vampires. The idea that sunlight harms vampires comes from the silent film Nosferatu. And if people actually bothered to watch the movie, they would find out it's not the sun that does anything to Orlok. It is the crow of a rooster. It even says several times, a crow of a rooster. Yeah, so sunlight does not harm vampires at all. And in fact, in novels like Dracula, they actually go out in the daytime. There's a scene in the novel Dracula in which Dracula is stalking a woman, which I wish more authors would pick up on, because since Lucy was the only vampire that was taken out on British soil, that means there is another bride of Dracula still out there. That's right, a bride who was a woman that Dracula stalked in the daytime. In the daytime. Oh. Wooden stakes. All they do is paralyze a vampire. That's all they're going to do. You take that wooden stake out, the vampire is back up doing their vampire things. Okay, if you really want to get rid of a vampire completely, you not only have to put the wooden stake through them, but you have to cut off this, you have to cut out the heart, and you have to cremate the entire body and scatter their ashes to the wind. Because if you just put a wooden stake in them, besides the fact somebody could pull that out, and they can come back, the vampire can get you in your dreams. Of course, the vampire can get you in your dreams even if you don't put a wooden stake in them, because it's an alternate way for them to feed. Because vampires do feed on psychic energy, according to folklore. And they get this psychic energy by manipulating your dreams to either cause the ultimate adult pleasure. That's right, vampires can feed that way. Or they can give you chronic nightmares. And by the way, one of the symptoms of anemia is chronic nightmares. And we all know who was often blamed for anemia back in the day. Werewolves, we're going to kind of werewolves for a second here. Werewolves are not immortal. And you do not need silver to take them out. Silver is actually for taking out vampires. That's right, silver is for vampires, not werewolves. Werewolves can pass away from any number of means, including old age, drowning, and disease. So please, vaccinate your werewolves. But here's the thing. Werewolves come back as vampires after they kick the bucket. That's right. There's absolutely no reason for werewolves and vampires to be natural-born enemies. If anything, vampires would view werewolves as particularly hairy toddlers going through their terrible twos, because those werewolves are going to one day rise up from the grave as a vampire. Vampires can have children. Yes, vampires can have children, but they can only have them with mortals. And usually it is an assigned male at birth vampire with an assigned female at birth human. Usually. The reverse can happen, but it's far more rare. And when they do this, they give birth to a dhampir. A dhampir is a natural-born vampire hunter. They can sense vampires. Now, according to folklore in some parts of Europe, instead of them just sensing vampires right off, they actually have a magic shirt that they have to take off, and they have to look through the sleeve like a telescope, and then they can see invisible vampires. That's right. Invisible vampires. Vampires, much like witches, were often blamed for a lot of things, including plagues, a good milking cow going dry, droughts, crop failure, poltergeist activity. That's right. If you have a poltergeist, there might very well be a vampire nearby. Because apparently, where a vampire goes, a poltergeist goes. Vampires and poltergeists, the ultimate buddy duo. In fact, there's so many ways to become a vampire according to folklore. Not just being bitten by one, but, unaliving yourself, unaliving somebody else, not being baptized, which that one's funny considering the fact that according to folklore, religious artifacts have 0 effect on vampires. Yeah, holding up a crucifix ain't gonna do nothing to a vampire. That's something Bram Stoker made up. But that being said, like I said, being unbaptized, being a redhead. Yeah, if you're a natural redhead, you come back as a vampire. I mentioned the werewolf thing. Witches come back as vampires according to some vampire folklore. The 7th son of a 7th son comes back as a vampire. That's right. And there's probably a lot more that I'm missing out on. I'm just so excited to be able to info dump all in one video. Remember what I said about vampires being blamed for droughts, and this is something that I've covered once before. According to folklore, if you want to end a drought, you need to get a vampire to take a bath. And what some villages would do is they would gather first all the men in the village and the surrounding area and take them to the river and make them take a bath because one of the men might be a vampire and not know it. That's right. You can be a vampire and can be completely unaware that you're a vampire. And if you take a bath and you're a vampire, even though you're completely unaware that you're a vampire, it can make it rain. So all those men out there who refuse to wipe between the cheeks and wash between the cheeks because you think that's going to make you magically want to taste the rainbow. Yeah, just clean yourself between there, besides the fact that it's extremely good hygiene and you stink. Also, you need to wash your pits and use antiperspirant because your BO is nasty. It's not a manly musk. But you also need to do it because you might be a vampire and don't know it. And you could break a drought, especially if you live in California. Okay? So all the men, take a bath. Practice good hygiene because you might be a vampire and not know it. And you could be the key to breaking a drought. Did you know that besides the taking off the head and all that jazz, another way to paralyze a vampire, not end them, paralyze them, is to drive an iron spike all the way through their skull, through the back of the skull and into the bottom of their grave. Yeah, that pins them there. You can also, if you're brave enough, take rose thorns and stick it up through their tongue and pin their tongue to the roof of their mouth. I know you think it's just for werewolves, but wolfsbane also frightens off vampires. Count Von Count from Sesame Street is actually probably one of the most folklore accurate vampires because vampires love to count. One of the ways you can get a vampire to stop chasing you is to spill grain at their feet. And then they have to stop and they have to count every single grain. Vampires love to count. They also love puzzles. So buy the vampire in your life a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle today. Info dump, info dump, info dump, info dump, info dump, info dump, info dump.